You are listening to the Star Lords Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerve herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
The dead speak. Every generation has its challenges to face, its own battles to win. Why should yours be any different? Quote, Luke Skywalker's Force Ghost to Cade Skywalker.
There is no death. There is the Force. Cade Skywalker, a descendant of Luke and presumably Mara Jade Skywalker, experienced this truth of the Jedi Code directly on many occasions. With his ability to perceive shatter points, he could even make it literally true, as he could heal the shatter points within beings on the brink of death and use the same ability to kill. This tenet of the code was present in his life in many ways. Kukuruk, a whipped Jedi Master, who fought in the Clone Wars, would resurface during Cade's life. Darth Krayt, Cade's nemesis, also a tragedy of the Clone Wars, returned from behind the Veil of Death to wreak havoc on the galaxy and Cade's family. But Cade's story, and perhaps the story of the Skywalkers, started far earlier than 127 ABY. During the Second Great Schism in 7000 BBY, an alchemist named Karnes Muir followed Ajunta Paul in his rebellion against the Jedi Order. Along with his alchemical colleague, the Lady Sorzis Zin constructed an item of terrible purpose. Although many abominations were spawned by the Dark Jedi during the darkness, those created by Muir and Sorzis Zin have stood the test of time. They collaborated on the creation of a piece of jewelry, which would be uncreatively, but simply dubbed the Muir Talisman by historians. This object was Karnes's best attempt at immortality. He was more than the ideal person when it came to the talisman's construction, with sources in doing much of the crafting of the ornate, biomimetic art form. It was golden in color and resembled an insect of some sort. 3 legs sprouted from the sides of its body, and 2 mandibles were at its head. In the center of its cephalus was an aquamarine jewel. Its form was both beautiful and somewhat unsettling, but its function was nothing short of horrific. It lent him the ability to infect sentient beings with a terrifying disease that would change them into hulking, ravenous, clammy-skinned, and jagged-toothed beasts known as Rakghouls. Upon death, Muir's spirit inhabited the talisman. When worn by unwitting beings, they would slowly, sometimes rapidly, be corrupted by the ghost of Karnes Muir. The Rakghouls were intended to be a relatively easily produced army. They were totally compliant to the talisman's host, and could also use weapons they had skill with in life, when commanded. Naturally, Karnes Muir, much like some of the exiled contemporaries like Romulus Dreepa, had delusions of galactic dominion, which never quite materialized. The talisman, and thus Muir, would remain attached to a particular through line in galactic history. It intersected in the lives of the most prominent Skywalkers, such as Anakin, Luke, and finally Cade. Few religious organizations, or indeed institutions of any kind, have survived the rigors of galactic history quite as well as the Jedi Order. Brought to the brink of extinction again and again as part of the inexorable swinging pendulum of war, the Jedi have proven difficult to kill. Like his teachers Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda, Master Skywalker would also learn the techniques required to become a Force ghost after death. The specifics of Luke's death are lost to history, but he re-entered galactic events as a Force ghost around 130 years after the Battle of Yavin, acting as a wise counsel to a reckless young man of the Skywalker line. Cade would also receive visits from the Force ghost of his father, Cole Skywalker. Cole, for his part, made a mark on the galaxy through his work in ecology on worlds savaged during the Ozon invasion a century earlier. Many of his thoughts on the Force and his life are preserved in his personal journals. While he made significant progress restoring planets, his efforts would eventually be undone by malicious sabotage. Cole would be among the first casualties of a new galactic war. He died defending younglings and apprentices of the Jedi Order from the emergent One Sith faction. Darth Nil, a Nagai warlord converted by Darth Krat to the One Sith theology, killed Master Skywalker with a ruthless barrage of Force lightning. A teenaged Cade was savaged by Cole's diversionary tactics. He was left in orbit inside an environmental suit, floating above the founding world of the Jedi Order, Ossus. Eventually, he was recovered by pirates coming to the abandoned world in search of loot. Upon regaining consciousness, Cade feigned amnesia and put his Jedi training behind him, forsaking the Force for years to come. Cade made friends quickly while gallivanting across the stars amongst the galaxy's scum and villainy. Delia Blue, the Zeltron, and Jeriah Sin eventually joined Cade's crew aboard his starship, the Minok. After forsaking the Jedi path, Cade quickly developed a dangerous death stick habit and was also quite fond of the galaxy's myriad forms of alcohol. His drug of choice were the death sticks, as the hallucinogenic euphoria they produced deadened his Force sensitivity and quieted the ghosts of his past. Considering how many dead relatives he had to speak to on a regular basis, between surviving or inflicting torture, laser battles, and similar Skywalker pastimes, Cade's addiction to death sticks could perhaps be seen as self-medication. Despite his best efforts, however, the dead still spoke to him through the Force. Cole, Luke, and even Anakin Skywalker appeared to him on several occasions, offering unsolicited advice, yet not appearing when he did want their wise counsel. Cade's antithesis, his nemesis, Darth Krayt, had his own ghosts to struggle with. Whatever psychic damage such necromantic obsessions induced in Krayt may have been remedied via alchemical tinctures and drugs, all infused with the dark side of the Force, and prepared by such masters of the arts of change as Darth Malady and Darth Wylock. The former of his part also intercessed with the dead on his master's behalf. Ultimately, Rylock busted the ghost of Darth Nehdu, sending the malicious riddle-speaking spirit into oblivion.
The Veil.
I want nothing more to do with the Jedi or their wars.
Corinda Dre.
The Great Holocron contains many references to the prophecy of the Chosen One. It goes as follows: a Jedi will come to destroy the Sith and bring balance to the Force. Prophecies and their interpretation can be dangerous pursuits. The Force can alter and augment one's vision, sometimes revealing the future or possible futures to the seer. Such revelations can inspire those who receive them to commit horrific acts to prevent an evil future. During one of the Old Republic's most trying times, the Mandalorian Wars, a Jedi Padawan by the name of Zane Carrick entered the maelstrom of galactic history from inauspicious beginnings in circa 4000 BBY. The Jedi Order had yet to develop its strictures around primarily recruiting beings at an immature state of development. Corinda Dre and her husband, for example, as well as their steward Hazan, began their training as adults. As a youth, Zane was considered talented enough with the Force to begin training. Despite his latent talent, however, Padawan Carrick was a poor student. He was constantly late, struggled with meditation and Jedi philosophy, and developed no particular abilities with respect to the Force. If anything, his talent seemed to lay in bungling up simple assignments from his master, Lucien Dre. Master Dre was a member of a clandestine sect of Jedi counselors, operating outside the authority of the Jedi Council. Trinda, Lucien's mother, founded this cult, called the Covenant. She was considered to be one of the most powerful prognosticators within the Order, able to see beyond the veil of time into the future through the Force. She saw Exar Kun's corruption and fall to the dark side as a major failing of the High Council, believing it to have been preventable if only the Council had more aggressive talents such as hers. In response, she founded the Covenant, which saw into the future in order to gain intelligence about threats to the Jedi Order and intervene to prevent them. To accomplish this, however, she believed it would sometimes be necessary to violate the code, which the Council would never permit. So she conducted her business in secret. She trained those within the Order with a natural inclination towards Force-powered divination, which included her son and many Miraluka, such as Canela. Canelia, Dre, and 3 other masters made up the first Watch Circle, the premier coven within the Covenant. They were all assigned to Terrace, where they used their prophetic abilities to divine a vision concerning Terrace's rogue moon. When one of their students discovered some of the Circle's less than ethical practices, they each slaughtered their students on the day of their knighting ceremony. Zane, in his typical style, was late to the occasion. Upon entering the ceremonial chamber, he was greeted with glowing blue, green, and yellow lightsabers, illuminating the murdered corpses of his classmates. Canelia was a Miraluka, a species of near-human, notable for possessing no working photoreceptors. Their overall facial structure was in all respects the same as any human face, yet the entire species were blind as Minox, possessing only vestigial eyeballs. They had a distinct advantage over sighted beings, acute perception through the Force. In watching a Miraluka Jedi wield a lightsaber in the elegant Matuki form, or an actor on the stage, one would not know that the performer had no working eyes, particularly if the performer was wearing the traditional veil over the upper portion of their face. Some Miraluka, such as Canelia, could see with greater clarity than any sighted being. Through the Force, she witnessed the wretched Muir talisman re-entering the galaxy through Zane Carrick and his bumbling around the Rakghoul-infested sewers of Terrace, and its subsequent journey through the galaxy as it crossed paths with the Skywalkers. Zane escaped the aborted knighting ceremony, soon disappearing into the gleaming megapolis of Terrace, winding up in its impoverished undercity. Eventually, alongside Jedi Master cum archaeologist Celeste Morn, he discovered the very sort of sinister object his masters feared so much and sought to remove from the galaxy. They unearthed the Muir talisman. It attached itself to Celeste, and for the nearly 4,000, she wore the amulet, bearing the burden of constant psychic battle against the spirit of Carness Muir. This event was the first documented outbreak of the Rakghoul plague, with the powers of the talisman infecting some of those unfortunate beings who found themselves nearby. Though Celeste and the talisman soon left Terrace, they left behind a legacy of one of the most dangerous and horrifying infectious diseases known. It is thanks only to the efforts of such controversial figures as Revan and Darth Malak that the Teresian outbreak was contained, preventing Carness Muir from building an abominable army of flesh-hungry and completely loyal monsters. Similarly, Cassius Fett would contain an outbreak on the icy world of Jebel by bombarding its surface with thermonuclear warheads. The Sand Demon.
Remarkable. The beast appears to have gone into hibernation and shed its skin. The amount of blood it's letting is astounding. The beast's stench is thick on us. It makes my eyes water.
Tatooine is a harsh world for any being. Whether it's merciless heat, marauding Tusken Raiders, or the legendary Krayt Dragon, death seems to beneath every grain of sand. As impressive and indomitable as Krayts are, there is one incredible creature that actually preys on them. The Sand Demon, a long-lived insectoid creature, swam through the sand and tunneled through the rocks with sharp limbs, also using them to kill prey. The Sand People believed that they grew in power with each kill, and commemorated them on cave paintings. They also believed that the animals were invulnerable. At some point in their life cycle, sand demons enter a period of hibernation. When they re-emerge, they molt their carapace in an orgy of blood, more deadly than before. After the massacre at Ossus, Cade entered a period of hibernation, as far as the Force was concerned. When eventually he was brought into the Sith Imperial War, his metamorphosis began. Later in the war, he briefly joined the One Sith, completely forsaking his Jedi past, only to discard the Sith and their teachings. Cade shed both his Jedi and Sith backgrounds, continuing to fight on his own terms, and to hunt the galaxy's Krayt Dragon, the Darth who took the animal's name. Cade pursued his quarry to the world of Had Abaddon, and alongside the immortal Celeste Morn, killed Darth Krayt for the first time. At the same battle, he used his ability to manipulate shatter points to destroy Karness Mirror and his wretched talisman, finally freeing Morn from her terrible burden. Eventually, Cade made peace with occasionally seeing dead people. Krayt managed to survive his first death, but eventually, Cade killed him in a lightsaber duel on Coruscant again. Cade threw away the Death Stick habit with R2, Red, and Jiraiya at his side, walked out of galactic history and into the stars.
Shatterpoint.
I can see every flaw. All I have to do is pour the Force into the cracks. Cade Skywalker to the spirit of Karness Mirror.
The will of the Force is difficult to determine. Force users must rely on their feelings, and are usually only capable of intuiting in a vague way the direction the pervasive energy field is guiding their fate in. Perhaps, like the Dreys often bring disaster to the galaxy in their attempts to see the future. Sith prophecies, such as that of the Sith Ari, are vague and subject to equally logically consistent interpretations. The prophecy of the Chosen One was archived by Jocasta Nu, and according to Obi-Wan Kenobi, failed to bring balance to the Force. There is one Force technique with an ancient history that stands apart from typical Force-powered soothsayings: the ability to see and manipulate shatter points. Darth Traya, in the dark period after the old Sith Wars, learned to see these nexuses in the Force. They were centers, often located with particular beings, or places, sometimes even objects, which held together the fragile edifice of fate. Apply the right pressure on the shatter point, and it would crack, altering fate in 1,000 different ways. Mace Windu was also skilled in perceiving these cracks in the Force, and was well aware of the consequences that arose from manipulating them. Cade was particularly skilled in his powerful technique, and seemed to acquire it intuitively, without any instruction from a master. Going solo.
Yeah, I know the song. We take what we are given. We do what we must. Cade Skywalker. In the decades following the Galactic Civil War, a new dynasty of rulers was born. Jaina Solo Fel and Jagged Fel were its forebearers. After Jagged's ascension, he named the child born to him and Jaina as his successor. The Fel Empire, though bearing many similarities to the Galactic Empire upon which it was based, was more conservative in deploying the military to achieve its ends. The new empire was far less socially repressive, yet it seemed to achieve what Emperor Palpatine claimed to pursue in founding his own empire. A century of near unprecedented galactic stability and security followed the founding of the Fel Empire. The Fel dynasty's third emperor, great-grandson to Leia and Han Solo, would see the empire through its most trying moments. The war against Krait's one Sith, who ousted Emperor Roan Fel and appropriated most of his empire's resources, was costly to say the least. Roan, along with his trusted Imperial Knights and small cadre of loyalists, fled Coruscant in exile, and with allies as diverse and questionable as Cade Skywalker, and those as noble as Admiral Gar Stazzy of the Galactic Alliance, he fought a guerrilla war against the galaxy's red menace, the Sith. Imperial Knights, though not Jedi, had very similar training and shared an alignment with the light side of the Force. While the Jedi subjected themselves to the will of the Force, the Imperial Knights, silver-bladed lightsabers in hand, answered only to their Emperor. While Jedi typically wore humble robes in earthy colors, the Imperial Knights donned resplendent crimson, sets of armor plating protecting every part of their body but their face. The Emperor, in Roan's case also a knight, was entrusted with the responsibility of protecting peace in the galaxy. In his desperation to dethrone Krayt, however, Roan sacrificed his principles. He attempted to acquire the Mirror Talisman to use as a weapon, and later attempted to deploy the nightmarish bioweapon Omega Red on Coruscant. For this last transgression, Roan was slain by one of his own knights. His daughter Maricia succeeded him, and she went on to form 1/3 of the Galactic Triumvirate, a new government led equally by executives from the Galactic Alliance and the Jedi Order that succeeded the Sith Imperial War. Far, far away from Coruscant, one of Maricia's lesser-known cousins was toiling away in obscurity. Anya Solo was a mechanic at a low-class junkyard, happily fixing the ships of such charismatic beings as the assassin droid turned bounty hunter AG-47. After the poisoning of Dak in the war, many Mon Cals were dislocated from their homeworld and faced prejudice on the worlds they sought refuge on. Anya, in true Solo style, took one such refugee on as a mechanic in her junkyard, and the two formed a close friendship. Their peaceful, if hard-working and occasionally messy lives were rudely interrupted by a second-hand tool that made its way into Anya's possession. It was a lightsaber, previously owned by an Imperial Knight, and sought after by agents with far less altruistic goals than the Knights. These agents tried to kill Anya for her acquisitiveness, and with her Mon Cal companion in tow, escaped the world aboard AG-47's ship. What followed was a sort of intergalactic mess that only a Solo could possibly get into, or out of. It was filled with blaster shootouts, deadly silica rain, space battles, betrayal, and no small degree of shameless ignorance of impossible odds. AG accompanied Anya due to a favor he owed to an unnamed Solo, possibly one of her ancestors. Given AG's similarity to IG series droids, and their history trying to capture or kill Han Solo, this is a curious detail indeed. Eventually, Anya and her companions uncovered a labyrinthine plot put into motion by a renegade Sith. This Darth Red who is behind a number of terrorist attacks throughout the galaxy, was not associated with the One Sith or any known lineage of the Sith. The Obsidian Armored Warrior, in fact, had a motivation entirely singular for one bearing the title of Darth. He wanted to end the Sith, once and for all. When Anya put his heart in the crosshairs of her sniper rifle and squeezed the trigger, he succeeded, as far as he was concerned. Elsewhere in the galaxy, however, such powerful Darksiders as Darth Nil lurked, plotting their revenge in the darkness.
Thanks for flying with us. Jordan here. Just wanted to let everyone know what's happening here at the Star Lores podcast. Star Lores is now on Discord. If you would like to join the Star Lores Cantina Discord server, you can find a link in the description or on any of our social media accounts. Reach out with a DM or email. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter by searching the Star Lores podcast. Go ahead and give our page a like and send us a message. You can also email at starlorespodcast@gmail.com. Send us your fan art, Star Wars collections, or fan fictions, and you may even get a feature on one of our pages or even the show. Don't be afraid to offer corrections or add to any of the topics that we discuss on the show. We are also on Patreon, so if you want to help us pay the bills, as well as get a few awesome perks like bonus episodes, access to the private Facebook group, or the VIP section of the Discord server, head on over to patreon.com/starlores and sign up for as little as $1 a month. And finally, make sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher app or YouTube, as well as sending us a 5-star review on iTunes. This really helps us reach a wider audience. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Hello and welcome again to the Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Christian.
This is Jordan, and welcome aboard the Millennial Falcon.
We are currently sitting in orbit above the planet Bastion, in the Braxton sector, out in the Outer Rim. This planet has a bit of a history in Star Wars. It was where the Imperial Remnant fled after the collapse of the Empire, and where Roan Fel's Empire was established as their capital world. For this episode, we're going to be talking about a time in the Star Wars galaxy, the farthest into the future that Star Wars has ever gone prior to the Disney canon. I think even now Disney hasn't gone this far yet. So on the Star Wars timeline, we're sitting 130 years after the Battle of Yavin. So all the characters we know and grew up with have died, at least of old age, if not other causes. And we kind of have a clean slate that Star Wars is working from. In the Legacy era is what it's referred to as. And all the content for this comes from the Dark Horse comic series, Star Wars Legacy. Even though it is a clean slate, obviously we're still working within the parameter of the Star Wars galaxy. So you still have like things like the Empire, which looks a lot different than what you typically think of when you think of Star Wars empires. For the first time, we actually have a good empire. So they're more of a protagonistic force in this setting, and how that kind of came about in the years leading up to the point, just to give everyone a little bit of a background information. So after, the generation after Luke Skywalker, his niece and nephews, they get married, his kid gets married, and they kind of have descendants. So we're again, 130 years out, you're looking at maybe the great-great-grandson and daughters of the characters we knew. And so the empire that exists today is the lineage of... Sorry, I'm just trying to think. So Han and Leia's daughter, Jaina Solo, marries Roanfell. No. Jagged Fell, sorry.
Yeah.
And they establish the new empire together. So they become the first emperor and empress.
Mm-hmm.
And so that family line, known as the Fell dynasty, takes us to what is now our modern point with the Fell Empire.
Yep.
So they still use the same symbolism. They still use stormtroopers. Like, a lot of their aesthetic is very imperial from what you recognize, but their philosophy is not rooted in the dark side. They're not being led by any kind of Sith Lord.
Yeah.
They're a lot more politically neutral. They're more of a default setting.
Yeah.
At least that's where we start in Legacy, which is an interesting take, because typically empires in Star Wars are Sith empires, and they're depicted as evil just out of hand.
It is, though. It seems a little more realistic, simply for the fact that I feel like in real life, that's how empires sort of evolve. They could be very ideological in the beginning, but then they kind of become a little more benign
Later on, yeah.
Yeah, later on, So, and I mean, it's always interesting if you see, like, even today, what's the last remnant of the Roman Empire? Well, it's the Roman Catholic Church, right? Like, that's sort of...
Depends who you ask. There's a lot of people that would claim that title. But yeah, essentially you have all these different groups that claim direct or indirect lineage to the Roman Empire.
Yeah. But the Roman Catholic Church is a very different thing than the Roman Empire, right? Like, and obviously has a very different philosophy and all that kind of stuff. But I do think it seems a little more realistic than just empire bad. And
and it's defeated wholesale and just disappears.
Yeah.
There's I don't know a lot about how or why this dynasty was started, because if you think about it, like, Leia was very pro democracy.
Yeah.
And so for her daughter to become one of the first empresses after, her era. I don't know what changed in Jaina to make her the way she is, maybe rebellion against her mother. I mean, there's a lot that does happen on the galactic stage. The Imperial Remnant kind of gets merged into the government as it existed. So they never really went away. And so maybe this was like converting them to a better future. But they are the preeminent government.
Yeah. Well, and even with that, like, welcoming the Imperial Remnant into the fold, it is sort of, again, geopolitically, that's kind of what you have to do, right? Like,
otherwise it'd be unending war.
Yeah,
right? Bloodshed on both sides, and until every last one of one side or the other is completely exterminated.
Yeah, I find it interesting that they went that direction with it instead of just like the typical black and white.
So I think that actually speaks to the entire Legacy series. It's a lot grayer than the Star Wars that anyone kind of recognizes. Like, light and dark start to really become amorphous. There's a lot more gray at play with Star Wars Legacy, which I really like. It's
for sure.
It's a tone that I think that has been, like, a character here, a character there in other stories might have embodied, but this whole scape of Star Wars Legacy is a lot grayer for Star Wars.
And I think that's kind of why they went so far into the future, is so that they could depart a little bit from the sort of atypical archetypes that had been set up by George Lucas. It did give them, I feel like it gave them a little more license to,
a lot more freedom to work in and play in this new world. It's a lot like how Knights of the Old Republic went backwards in time to have a reset of the setting.
Right.
They just went forward. On that note, there are a couple of things that do bother me, but we'll just get out of the way. I love Star Wars Legacy just out of the gate here. It's one of my favorite, and for a lot of fans, it actually landed very well. It was well received in the Star Wars community broadly. And it is one of my favorite Star Wars IPs, I think just below the Clone Wars. But but that being said, one of the things that does bother me a lot is, and this I've mentioned this before, going backwards in time, but going forwards in time as well. There's a lot of a lack of two big things. One, a lot of the lack of evolution of like technology and stuff.
Yeah.
Part of that is good because you're still grounded in it as being Star Wars. You still recognize ships and things. It has that Star Wars-y flavor. My problem with it is kind of twofold, and it's really represented by the Stormtroopers. So you have this new dynasty, and it didn't bother me as much until the Disney Star Wars came out, and this is one of the few times I will compliment Disney. The evolution of the Stormtrooper armor, and even that kind of progression. So within Star Wars, you'd had the Clone Troopers Phase 1, then you had Clone Troopers Phase 2, then they morphed into Stormtroopers. But the Legacy era Stormtroopers look exactly like the Stormtroopers from Episode 6, 130 years into the future, right?
Yeah.
There has been no forward movement on that front. We do see, I guess I'll say, also, if you haven't read the Legacy stuff and you've gotten this far anyway, spoilers, but you do see some alien races that have been adopted into the Stormtrooper Corps a lot more, and they have unique customized armor to their unique alien physiologies, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But again, that's more like a function that they had to do because of their unique body types rather than a technological evolution.
Right.
And so one of the things I do like about the Disney Star Wars is that evolution of Stormtrooper armor. I might not be like 100% behind the new designs. I do think the new Sith Troopers looked pretty decent.
Yeah. Totally.
But and I like kind of like the tactical elements of the new Stormtroopers, kind of the chest rigs and stuff that some of the heavy troopers carry.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of my gripes, is like a lack of evolution, at the very least in the armor.
Because there should
if
be.
nothing else.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Something that just make them a little more distinct. And I think they did that on purpose because they wanted to make it clear that this is still the Empire, right? But at the same time, they could have maybe done something a little more unique with it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that continues to kind of spring up in Star Wars, like, and Disney's also guilty of this, but so is Legacy, is this reemergence of the Sith, right? Like, you're kind of, it's kind of a catch-22. This kind of harkens back to our first episode where we're talking about like the Chosen One, and then, you know, if it was Luke, if it was Anakin, and I think we settled that it was Anakin. But that being said, like, okay, if he's the Chosen One and he's bringing balance to the Force, and, you know, even right after you have reemergent Palpatine, you have reemergent Sith, you have, you know, and then this problem still carries on 100 years into the future, right?
Yeah.
So like, what did that really do? What does Anakin's life really mean?
Yeah.
If the problem just keeps coming back,
it almost seems like the Force is more or less destined the universe to be this way, that it's sort of a yin yang concept where it's a constant ping pong back and forth between dominance of the light side and dominance of the dark.
I could get behind that if that was established.
Sure.
Out of hand.
You kind of have to infer it.
Yeah, and if someone said something like, this is the way things are, like those are kind of like, that's the groundwork of the universe.
Right.
But then to put so much emphasis on Anakin being the Chosen One and that prophecy and all this stuff, and then like what does it all really amount to in the end, right? If you're back to the drawing board, right?
It's true. But then here's the question, like, what would you do with Star Wars if it was no longer just like a battle between the dark and the light?
I don't know if everyone could get behind it, but I really think that there's room enough to have a secular war.
Yeah.
Where you have enemies like Mandalorians, and you could have the Empire without any kind of Sith element, right? You could
or even like an Empire where they ban the use of the Force.
Yeah, and that was something they toyed with in I can't remember the series, but when the Jedi were being again persecuted by the secular government of Coruscant,
right,
and with the Yazan Vong, right? Like those.
Yeah, I was thinking the Yazan Vong as well, because that's a threat to both the Jedi and the Sith.
Yeah, they're a threat to all Force users, right? So like those concepts were explored, but like for something like Legacy or something, like you could have a Mandalorians reemerge as a massive threat. You could have like this secular imperial dynasty fighting. You know, I don't know. I haven't written it in my head, but there's a lot that you could still do. People want to see lightsaber fights, though. Yeah, is the biggest thing.
I do think, you know, KOTOR 2, like with Darth Treya, trying to her whole like mission was to end the Force completely, right?
Yeah.
Like was to cut off all life from the Force. And again, with the way the lore is established, that would basically end the universe, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That like that the Force sustains all life, right? However, if you had someone maybe who was a little like someone who wasn't a Force user, but they were on some kind of inquisition to annihilate people who
use a
wield the Force.
You could almost have like a 40K angle on it, where like Force users are like warp witches that are being hunted by like secular governments, or even you could have like a religious kind of bent to it, right? Like the Inquisition. Yeah. There's a lot you could do. There's a lot you could explore, and unfortunately,
and you could even, from a writer's standpoint, trying to make Shades of Grey, right? Like you could actually present the argument in a way that's like, you know what, this constant like these massive swings every few decades of like the light side and the dark side is actually bad for civilization.
There are characters that literally voice those opinions.
Yeah.
And to have that being the main story thread. Yeah.
And be like, this is like, we need to end this like this cycle and stop it. And the actual problem is the Force itself, and not the battle between the light side and the dark side.
Yeah.
But that'd be a completely very fascinating angle to go at.
Absolutely. So those are kind of my gripes of the Legacy era. Now, all that being said, the Sith, as they reemerge, look pretty freaking sweet. I like them. I like Darth Krayt. Star Wars Legacy has all kinds of ties back into like the greater mythos, particularly with Dark Horse's Clone Wars and Republic series.
Yeah.
This episode might be a little bit comic heavy for people who haven't really been invested in the comics, but a lot of characters who were in the Clone Wars era do reemerge in this. And the crazy thing is, like, a lot of those, so not all aliens have the same kind of lifespans that humans do. So without any kind of magical plot devices or any kind of thing, like some of these Jedi, Master Kuruk and another one, I forget her name, but she's like a tree. They're both prominent characters in the Clone Wars, and they've survived all the way up until like 100 years later and become Jedi Council members by the end of it. Kind of other callbacks, Darth Krayt, big reveal, is the son of Ashard Het. And so he makes a big comeback, right? He was, the son of this prominent Jedi hero. Yeah. He himself has a past and rooted in the Jedi. And then even so let's bring it back a little bit. Darth Krayt leads the one Sith. So in a major shift, ideological shift from the rule of two Sith, the one Sith actually has like an army of Sith. And they end up taking over this secular Fel Empire and becoming, again, the rulers of the galaxy. Yeah. But their aesthetic is very much Darth Maul. So they have like all kinds of alien races and stuff, but they all have the Sith tattoos that Darth Maul has, which is very cool. It's black and red. Yeah. And even Darth Nil, who's a little more unique, has more of a black and white color coding. Right. But they're all very cool, very unique Sith Lords. I really like them, and I like their breakaway philosophy. Aside, my gripes of bringing the Sith back again as antagonists aside. Yeah. And I like the big reveal of Darth Krayt being such this old hero. And he's a fallen hero too, right? He's another almost Anakin Skywalker type figure. Yeah. Who's like severely injured and has the Yazanvong seeds implanted in him, which are slowly killing him. And he's actually rejected by typical Sith Lords. He goes to them for counsel through like a holocron, and like Darth Bane and Darth Revan, I think. Okay. Yeah, there's a cool scene depicted where all these ancient Sith Lords, like prominent Sith Lords, like are like tearing him down and telling him he's like a fake and things like that. He's not a real Sith. Kind of going back to the gray area, something I forgot to mention. So in the Fel Empire, they do raise essentially a middle ground set of Force users called the Imperial Knights. And they're really cool because they are not, they tend towards the light, but they are considered gray by Jedi. They're not religiously motivated. They're trained mostly as like protectors of the Emperor. They're his bodyguards, but they're Force users. They use white lightsabers and they have a uniform like red armor that they use. And they do play a significant role just kind of in the overall plot of like the internal structure of the Empire. But they definitely toy with the idea of like secularizing like people with, and weaponizing people with these abilities, right? They take less of a religious approach and more like, what if you had these crazy powers? How could we use that, right? For political, as a weapon, right? So they're less restrained by like ideology, religious ideology. Like they can use their lightsabers to kill you, right?
Yeah.
They can enact political violence if at the command of their emperor, right?
Totally.
They won't have like qualms about it. Whereas like the Sith are like in it for themselves, and the Jedi would rather not use Force whenever possible. These guys are more in the middle, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Cade Skywalker. He is
He's sort of the main character.
Yeah, the protagonist of this new era.
Yeah.
And he pretty much embodies, again, this gray kind of mix of like of a universe that we live in. He's like he's not a failed Jedi. He is a former Jedi who's like given up on the Jedi path. He's like a drug user. Like
he almost has like the scoundrel class to him a little bit.
Yeah, definitely has like a Han Solo streak.
Yeah.
Within the noble, like there's a little like noble kind of like diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
But definitely like the years have worked on him. He's jaded. He's angry. He's trying to numb himself to like his destiny essentially, and he's trying to actively reject his future. And kind of how we mentioned in the episode, he is constantly being harassed by his ancestors as Force ghosts, Mara Jade, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
They always come to appeal to him to try and draw him to the light side. And he himself has like he flirts with the dark side and has a fall himself. But ultimately, yes, he finds his redemption, but he still rejects becoming a Jedi in the end, which is also a cool, like finishing move.
Bit
where
of
it's
a
not,
twist.
Yeah, he doesn't like, it's not a happy ending for like pro Jedi fans, I guess I would say. But, you know, he's choosing to do what he wants with his own life after kind of everything gets squared away with the one Sith and all that.
Yeah.
Legacy had a part 2 that came out where they kind of shifted perspectives to another big protagonist, Anya Solo, who is the great granddaughter of the Solo line. And one interesting,
some kind of like third cousin.
Yeah, so they're all related.
Of Cade, yeah.
Of Cade, and also of the Empress, Marcia.
Yeah,
I don't know how to say her first name.
Yeah.
Fell. She becomes the Empress.
Yeah.
And so she's a cousin actually to all of them, but she's way more like her great grandfather Han. She's like a mechanic or a shipbreaker or something like that. And she's kind of living this like very mediocre life compared to her cousins. And I don't think they really play up their familial relationships. Obviously, her last name kind of gives her away.
Yeah.
But it's not like she's like calling up Cade on the phone or like hanging out with her Empress cousin or whatever.
Right.
And she actually has another encounter. So the one Sith are one faction. You have the Fel Empire. And then you also have the remnants. And they don't really... It's not super clear on where these people came from, but people who still follow the rule of 2. So you have Darth Red, that's Red with a W, and there's another Darth whose name I'm blanking on right now, who still kind of observe the Banes.
The old ways.
The old ways, exactly. So they actually reject the one Sith themselves.
Right.
And they're kind of like the primary antagonists of her story.
Yeah.
And they're kind of an offshoot because they also are opposed to the dominant one Sith faction and also the Fel Empire as well. But they're kind of... I guess, in my opinion, they're more smaller stakes than like the whole fate of the galaxy. I'm sure they have their own plots and schemes, but that whole kind of subplot is its own.
Yeah.
None of these characters is super clear as to like who their direct parentage is. There's no like, you know, you have this gap of years and like ancestors.
Yeah, there's 2 generations between
2 or 3, yeah.
Maybe 3, yeah.
Yeah.
Between them and
Luke
and Leia.
Yeah. So like on the one hand, like 130 years when you say it like that seems like a long time, but that's 130 years from the Battle of Yavin.
Right.
First of all. So like, you know.
So I could see maybe they're the 4th generation from
so they're not
Luke and Leia.
They're not crazy far removed. We're not like crazy
not like
into the
far.
future.
Yeah.
No. Because Luke would have died, you know, probably in his, let's say 70s.
Yeah.
If we're going by regular human lifespan.
Right.
Who knows how the Force affects all that.
Yeah.
But suppose he dies in his 70s, like that cuts your 130 year time frame, right? Because again, he was like 19 years old at the Battle of Yavin, right? So
yeah,
we are still cutting that time in half, right? So 60 years. And we know who Cade's father is, who's a Jedi. Cole Skywalker, some cool things on their appearances. Cole has really red hair, which obviously he got from Mara Jade.
Right.
As like probably his grandmother, I guess I would say.
Yeah, I would think Luke and Mara would be his grandparents. I would think, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. And then, well, here's the thing is like, so Mara Jade is killed.
Yeah, who are their kids again?
So they had Ben Solo.
Yeah.
No, sorry,
No.
Ben Skywalker.
Yeah.
It's freaking Ben Solo from
Yeah.
Disney. No, Ben Skywalker.
Yeah, Ben Skywalker.
Who gets
So is Ben
killed.
Skywalker the grandfather of
I think, but does
Cade?
I suppose he would be. Yeah. Yeah.
You would think that would be roughly the right timeline.
Yeah. And then, great grandfather, because he would be Cole's grandfather or father.
Father, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's that close. There could be one gap that we don't know about.
Maybe, yeah.
But so, like I said,
somebody correct us.
Yeah, if you
One
know
of
the
the
exact
listeners,
lineage, definitely give us
the
a shout
family
out.
tree here.
Yeah, but I think there's some missing gaps, and then you have like the Solo line, which probably came from the younger of the Solo.
Yeah.
So, Solo group, and then you have the Fells, who obviously come from Jagged Fell and his wife, whose name is totally blanking on me here.
Yeah. I don't know.
Jaina Solo, yeah. So there are some obvious kind of family lines, and Cade Skywalker has like the blonde hair, but it's more curly. He obviously looks like Luke, but a darker Luke.
He almost looks like he's in a metal band or something. At least from his
hairstyle,
comic book depiction. Yeah.
Which I really liked. He's kind of like worn, living a hard life in the galaxy. He's a bounty hunter / pirate / smuggler.
Totally.
But yeah, there's all these kind of like subtle character designs where you can really draw, like they look like they belong to their family legacy. So it's just an interesting little tidbit. Broadly, the art in Star Wars Legacy is really good too.
Yeah.
So one of the complementing factors of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, like I said, once everything is said and done, what we end up on the galactic stage is the Triumvirate, which is the Jedi, the Fel Empire, and one other faction, I can't remember who end up being the ultimate government of the galaxy. And that's kind of where we leave our story, where the Jedi are restored. Cade kind of like fades into doing his own thing on the side. He's like made peace with everything in his legacy, but he doesn't pursue the path of becoming some kind of Jedi master or anything like that.
Yeah.
But the Jedi are restored as an order, and they make an alliance with the Marissa Fel, who is the Empress of the new empire, and like I said, the last member of the Triumvirate, I can't remember who they are, but that kind of like is where we leave Star Wars in the Legacy era, which concludes the farthest we've ever gone in the Star Wars. Not canon. What's the other? Legends.
In Legends. Yeah.
Keep mixing Legends and Legacy in my head.
Which there are rumors.
Yes, if
that
they
Legends
are to be
could
believed,
be revived.
if they are to be believed, we'll see.
And perhaps they'll go further.
Maybe.
Sorry. So I actually just found out. So Nat Skywalker was the grandson of Ben Skywalker and older brother of Cole Skywalker. So Cole and
Kate's
Nat
uncle.
are the grandsons of Ben.
Great
grandsons of Luke.
But we're missing a generation, right? We don't know who Cole and his brother's parents are.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
It would be Ben Skywalker's son
or daughter.
Yeah, son or daughter.
And we don't know.
Yeah, there's no...
So there are some gaps in the family line. And imagine this for the Solo line. There's that generational gap kind of we don't know. But still, for that time frame, it seems kind of like squeezing a lot of generations in 130 years.
It does. But, I mean...
You can have kids at a young age.
You could. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
It's definitely not unheard of. But, yeah for sure.
But, that's kind of where we leave our journey into Legends for now.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next time. May the force be with you.